we get done here and I'm driving 3 hours to the Texas Capitol. The Texas Capitol is the people's house, and that includes inmates on death row who have been, I believe in this case, wrongfully confused and or wrongfully accused and wrongfully convicted. And so tomorrow, the House Criminal Jurisprudence Committee will hold a public hearing in the Texas House. We're going to shine a light on this case for all 31 million Texans to hear and to watch and to see. And we're hopeful that by Thursday evening, we're able to secure that pause button in this case. That's the goal of what we're all doing right now and what we'll be doing at the Capitol in the coming days.
Have you spoken to the governor?
No, I have not. Not about this case.
Do you know anyone who's spoken to him? Like, do you have any sense where his mind is at on this, or if he's even reviewing?
I have not spoken to the governor or his team about this. I know the Board of Pardons and Paroles will likely later today make the recommendation to the governor. I do know the governor and have worked with him for many years, and if I know anything about the governor is that he's going to take this seriously, and he's very smart, and he takes his time, and he cares deeply about safeguarding the fundamental constitutional rights of Texans, and that includes, most importantly, the right to life.
Can the committee do anything to actually stop it?
The committee is, I'm just a member of the committee. I don't want to speak for our chairman or the other committee members. I think we'll have a robust discussion and about this case, and I do believe that all options, all tools are on the table, and we'll utilize whatever power we can to slow this down.
What is it about this case that makes you think that he could be innocent?
Well, you know, there's legislators. There are other legislators, Representative Hull and Representative Timish, and I know Representative Harrison, and many other legislators who have spent a long time on this case specifically, and have gone and visited Mr. Roberson there in Huntsville. As for me, there are many concerns. I believe strongly that the statute that we passed a few sessions ago, our junk science law, that the legislature in Texas really led the charge on nationally. Republicans and Democrats, I believe, unanimously supported and voted for that junk science law. That includes the most conservative Republicans like myself and Representative Timish and Representative Hull and Representative Harrison, and then liberal Democrats from all over the state. We agreed that this was a good law, and I believe that in this case, from what I've read, that law has been largely ignored. Not only by the trial court, but by the courts of appeals at all levels. And I've been doing this long enough. I'm in my 6th term now, running for my 7th term. I've been doing this long enough to know when the system fails someone. And I believe strongly that the system has failed Mr. Roberson in this case. And it's our obligation and our duty to speak up and to step up.
On social media Friday, you know, your call for calling this committee hearing was gaining a lot of traction. What is the reaction from other legislators in the Capitol?
From the legislators that I've heard and spoken with, it's been largely supportive. I mean, we have the legislature has a role here, and anyone who claims that the legislature doesn't understand the proper oversight role of the legislature. The House Criminal Jurisprudence Committee oversees the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. The Judiciary Committee, which I chair, oversees the courts of criminal appeals and all district courts across the state. And like I said, when we see such a system failure like we've seen here, it's the legislature's obligation to step up and to hold public hearings and to shine a light on it. And that's all we're doing with this hearing tomorrow. I haven't heard any pushback from any of my legislative colleagues in the House to our holding a hearing tomorrow.
What was your reaction to the judge's ruling today?
I wasn't surprised, frankly. But, you know, with all due respect to the judge who ruled and to all of our great judges across the state, we in the legislature, we pass bills and we expect them to be followed. And when we see our statute, our junk science statute, which we spend a lot of time on, just being largely ignored, I mean, just totally ignored, I've got a big problem with that. But I wasn't necessarily surprised at the rulings today. Here, speak up.
Thank you, guys.
Anything else? Gretchen? Where's Gretchen? Gretchen, you want to come back and close?
I'd just like to introduce
another hero who's here today, who is a man named Brian Wharton. If you've been following this case, there's no way you haven't heard that name yet, because this is an individual who's had the courage to admit to his own mistakes. He was the detective who investigated the underlying death of Robert's daughter as a homicide. He has admitted to shortcomings in that investigation, but more than that, he has come out publicly, and he's here today. So it is my profound pleasure to introduce Brian Wharton. Excuse me.
Let me start by pushing back against one thing. We throw around the word hero way too much. If simply living your integrity becomes heroic, we are in dire straits, right? Okay. So yes, I was involved in the initial investigation of Robert Roberson's case. We did very quickly focus on him, and everything seemed to agree with our focus, to include that which was coming from the hospitals and from the medical professionals that followed us. We were somewhat dependent upon what they told us, and what they told us was shaken baby and there's your man. And so that's the direction everything went, to the exclusion of all other possibilities, really. And so he went to trial on our case. I was very unhappy with the course of the trial in those days. I didn't give voice to it. I was just alone in my thoughts. I thought, there were some issues there with a vigorous defense, no testing of his mental acuity, and then the introduction of a sexual assault claim that was never, ever corroborated by any form of evidence. So when Gretchen showed up at my house years later and asked me if I would have a conversation with her, I invited her in and told her, I've kind of been expecting you, someone, to show up, because I knew the appeals were still ongoing. Let me just say, since that time to this day, I've become convinced that Robert is an innocent man. The foundations of our case were in shaken baby syndrome, and that is gone. Okay? That's not science. That was an idea that became science because enough people said it enough times. We know how that works in our culture these days. It just isn't it. I've had the pleasure of spending some time with Robert. I'm in a church that's fairly close to him, so I get to go visit him. Let me just say, Robert is an innocent man. But more than that, he's a kind man. He is a gentle man. He is a gracious man. I was talking to the legislators earlier, and they talked about their visit with him, and how strange it was when they got to the end of that. Robert prayed for them. They didn't pray for Robert. And that's been my experience every time I visit him. Robert, his personality, his joy, his hope, that's what comes out. He prays for me every time I'm there. He's a special man, and I'm ashamed that I missed that 20 years ago. We were looking for an offender. We labeled him as such, and we made it stick, all based on junk science. And I can tell you today, he is not an offender. He is completely innocent, and we owe it to him, all of us, not just the witnesses. All of us as citizens of the state of Texas have work to do to right this. These kind of things happen. Innocent people spend time in prison. Innocent people are put to death because the citizenry has gone on about their lives, because we quit caring, and we quit paying attention. So please, pay attention. Innocent people are in prison, and an innocent man is scheduled to die Thursday. So anyway, that's me.
What has it been like for you to watch this play out in your own community?
My community is very supportive. I've stood before my congregation and told them what I did and what I am doing. A large number of them were here with me this morning. They've been very supportive, and they see what I see. Okay? Most of them have, I've sent them all, I said, look, don't believe me, go to the Innocence Project page, read for yourself, read the filings, read everything you can find it yourself, and they all come back to me and say, okay, we're with you on this. They've signed the petitions, and they're on their way to, some of them I think are going to Austin as well, but so.
It's my understanding that in one of those visits to Mr. Roberson, he actually said that he forgives you for what happened.
Yes.
Can you explain that moment and just kind of walk us through the emotions?
I wish I could. That was the first time we'd met since the trial, and so I was there, but I wasn't there. Kind of, yeah. We had a conversation, and I apologized to him for my role in his being put there, and my role in not being able to get him freed from there. And he spoke words of forgiveness to me, which were deeply meaningful to me in the moment. But if the state proceeds, whatever Robert gave me, the state will take away from me, because that death will follow me for the rest of my life.
How long have you been involved in the appeals process, and what was your reaction to specifically today?
I think Gretchen found me in 2016, so
2018.
somewhere in there. So I've been, wherever she found me, I've been involved ever since. Like Gretchen, I am saddened by what we saw today, and what's been going on up until this point. We have a system that's in place that should catch this stuff and fix it, particularly with the junk science law. But like all human systems, we go into this self-protection mode, and we find ways not to do the right thing if it's going to hurt our reputation, maybe. And so, yeah. And so we're always having to seek it out. That's why the junk science law came into place, because justice wasn't happening. We could see it out there in front of us, but we weren't there yet, so we needed to write a new law. And we wrote a new law, but the courts are ignoring it. So the justice is still somewhere out there in front of us. And we still, again, not just the lawyers and the legislators, but all of us, we have to make it our passion to seek justice. And it will always be seeking. It will never be, we'll never find the day when we've got it, okay? And so we're pleading for your help. Help us seek justice for Robert and all the rest of those who are held in prison unjustly.
And as a pastor and a person involved in this case, what will you be doing going forward in the in-between as we get closer to October 17th?
I'll be at the hearings tomorrow in Austin. There'll be a lot of prayer. My community is gathered around me in prayer. It's this thing that's still out there before me, and it will always be there. And so, regardless of what happens in the next few days, this is the direction of the rest of my life. We're gonna fix this. And to my way of thinking, we have seen here this morning that we as humans are incapable of unbiased deliberation. All of us carry a bias in us. Okay? The fact that your legislators and your judges have a D or an R behind their name tells you they've got a bias. Okay? Friends bias you, family bias. You can't remove it. And since we can't remove it, we need to just get rid of the law. We don't need to be executing people, period, in the conversation, because we cannot make that system work. It's impossible. If you're a Christian, like myself, if you call yourself a disciple of Jesus the Christ, there is no amount of theological gymnastics you can do to make this okay. It just doesn't happen. We are a people of peace and reconciliation, and that is not what this is about.
What is your message to the governor?
Peace and reconciliation. This is a broken system. This is a system that, you know, we can write law till doomsday, but again, justice will be that thing that's always out there before us. And so, yes, as Gretchen said, read it yourself. Don't rely on any aides or anybody else. Read it yourself. Understand what's happened here. Understand where the courts have kind of ignored the legislative intent and your signature as the governor, and do the right thing here.
And I'll just jump in and say we have some work to do, and we have more filings ahead of us. We are so grateful for your support and the spotlight you're shining as the fourth estate. An incredibly important role you play in this. Because I will say, I was thinking last night of the phrase, justice is blind. We all know what that's supposed to mean. It's a metaphor for impartiality. It's not supposed to be literal, that you are blind to the realities, to the evidence, to the complexities, and to the gross injustice that has been playing out in poor Robert's life pretty much his whole life. So let us go, and thank you. But you know, we urge you, if you can, to be there or follow what the lawmakers do. This was a profoundly bold step. We are so grateful they traveled miles and miles to be with us today, and I thank you for your time.
Gretchen, do you have any plans with the Supreme Court? Is that an next?
Yes.
Can you talk more?
Breaking news.
What are those plans?
I've got to go and type them up. That's the plan.